This conference will now be recorded.
In yesterday's session, we were discussing about EBS, what is EBS, how to create EBS value and attach and mount, right? So how to create, how to attach, and how to mount value to EC2 we discussed. So EBS is a block storage. So you can use block storage for booting the OS like as a VM disk or for any persistent storage where you need a very good performance in storage, kind of a database storage like that. You can use this EBS value. Yesterday session, we created one server. And for that server, we installed, we attached some additional storage. If you see, for this server, we attached some additional storage and we mounted that storage to one of the directory in that server. Whatever data gets generated in that folder, in that directory, programmatically, or whatever you are creating manually or programmatically in that folder, that gets persisted in that disk. So this directory in the system is mounted with this storage, that EBS value. Like this, you can create and attach multiple EBS values to the same EC2 instance as per your requirement, that is storage. Now, the way you have a EBS value, we have something called snapshot. EBS snapshot. So if required, we can create a snapshot of the EBS value. What is the snapshot first of all? The snapshot is nothing but a backup. It's an in-time backup of your EBS value. So even though EBS value is highly available service, let's consider there is an issue with that storage, that EBS is not available or accessible. At least if you have a backup, you can recover or restore your data from that backup. So EBS is offering a service called EBS snapshot, so that you can take a snapshot of the EBS value. In case if you lost the data, you can recover and restore the data from the backup, that is EBS snapshot. Otherwise, you can use EBS for migrating the data from one availability zone to another availability zone in that AWS region, or from that region to another region also. You can migrate the data using EBS snapshot. If you see, as of now, we created a server. We created a server in AWS cloud in one of the region. That is Mumbai region we created. In that Mumbai region, right, again you created in some availability zone, that EC2 instance you created in some availability zone, and you attached EBS value to this EC2 instance, additional value also you attached. This directory, that whatever directory, it is part of my home EC2 user, this EBS demo directory I mounted with this additional disk, and there is a one more storage that is mounted with the root. So whatever data gets generated in this folder, that is actually persisted as part of this storage, this disk. Now, even though AWS is highly available service, you can take a backup, you can take a snapshot of the EBS value for multiple purpose. You can take a backup of that EBS value for multiple purpose. One is backup and restore. Suppose if you lost this storage, right? If you have a backup, you can restore the data from the backup. That is one use case. And another one is migration. Suppose you want to migrate that data, that applications that applications, the data from one region to another region in AWS, or maybe same region, different availability zone also, that snapshot will help. So you can take a snapshot. The snapshot is nothing but a in-time backup. It's a in-time backup. You can take a backup, that in-time backup you can consider. At the time of taking a snapshot, whatever you have in this storage, so that will be taken as a backup here, that is snapshot. Typically, AWS in the background, AWS will maintain these snapshots, these backups in another service called S3. But those S3 buckets, whatever S3 buckets are internally used to store these snapshots, it will not be visible in our account. So whatever S3 buckets are internally used to store these snapshot, EBS snapshots, those will not be listed in our account, but internally EBS snapshots are stored, EBS backups are stored in the S3 buckets only. Sometimes in the interview they are asking this question. Is everyone clear? What is EBS snapshot? Internally, EBS snapshots are getting stored in what storage? Again, in the cloud. For what purpose we can use these snapshots? Now, if required, you can take a snapshot again like this. You can go to the snapshots. You can go to the snapshots under EBS. You can go to the snapshots. If required, you can click on this create snapshot and you can select whatever volume, which volume you want to take a snapshot. You need to select the volume, out of which volume, for which volume you want to take a snapshot. You can select from here and click on create snapshot. Otherwise, you can go to the volumes also. You can go to the volumes also. Whatever volume you want to take a backup, you can go to the volumes also and select the volume for which you want to take a backup. Let's say like this volume. Select the volume, go to actions, create snapshot. I am giving some description. Some description, whatever you want to give, you can give. And if required, you can give a tags. If required, you can give a tags for snapshots also. Something like this, you can give a snapshot tags also for snapshot. Now I am creating a snapshot. So whatever data we have at the point of time we are taking a snapshot, the data will be taken as a backup into that snapshot. Now if I go to the snapshots, if I go to the snapshots, right, you can see there is one snapshot which is getting created, which is getting created. So the snapshot will have the data, whatever data we had in that value at the time of taking a backup. So you need to take the snapshots periodically, so that if something goes wrong with your storage, you can restore with a recent backup, recent snapshot. You can take the snapshots periodically. You can write some kind of automation scripts. Maybe you can run that scripts using Jenkins also, using AWS CLI. Also, you can take a snapshot. You can execute those AWS CLI commands periodically in your Jenkins pipeline to take the snapshots automatically. Or AWS is also offering one service. AWS is also offering one service, that is Lifecycle Manager. You can create a lifecycle manager as per your lifecycle manager policy. AWS will create a snapshots of your volumes. So is everyone clear what is snapshot, how to create a snapshot? I have created a snapshot manually like this. Now if I have a snapshot, I can use this for a restore or recovery purpose if something goes wrong with that value. Otherwise I can use it for a migration. Migration in the sense, now whatever server, that application I have in this region, in this availability zone, if I want to migrate that to another location, right, in another location also I can create a server, but that server will get its own root storage. Where OS will be booted. You can install softwares like this. But whatever snapshot you have, you can copy the snapshots to another region also. You can copy the snapshot to another region also like this. The snapshot you can copy to another region like Singapore region, Hong Kong region, whatever region in AWS. But you can't attach the snapshots to the EC2 instances directly. This is not possible, guys. You can't attach the snapshots to the EBS EC2 instances directly. So using this snapshot, which you copy to that region, again you can create a value. Again you can create a EBS value. From the snapshot you can create a value. Like from the backup, again you are creating a storage. From the backup you are creating a value. Now if I create a value from the snapshot, this value will have a data also, because you are creating a value from the snapshot. So this value will have a data also. Then if I mount this, if I attach this value to this server, and if I mount this value to some directory, do we have the data in that storage, in that server? Can we access the data again, whatever we had in other locations? Yes. So that is how you can use snapshots. Snapshots can be used for migrations, or from one account, one region to another region like that. Or snapshots can be used for backup and restore. Now let me show that. Let's say I have a snapshot. If I want to migrate this to Singapore, right? What I will do, first I will copy this snapshot. I will copy the snapshot as is. Go to actions of the snapshot. There is an option called copy snapshot. So you can copy that snapshot to whatever region as per your requirement if required. So here, let me try to demonstrate to Singapore. So Singapore, AP Southeast one. So let me copy to AP Southeast one, that is Singapore region. Now the snapshot I am getting copied from Mumbai region to Singapore region. Now let me switch to Singapore. Let me switch to Singapore region. Let me switch to Singapore region. So here I have a snapshot. Can we copy EBS snapshots to other cloud? No, not other cloud. You can't copy snapshots to other cloud, but you can copy data from one cloud to another cloud. You can copy the data. There are other services available for that. Okay, there are other ways to do it. Whatever data you have in AWS cloud, AWS storage, that data can be migrated to another cloud also, not EBS snapshot. There are different data migration services available. You can use those services from one cloud to another cloud, not EBS snapshots. Now within AWS cloud, I am migrating from one region to another region like that. Now I copied to Singapore region, the snapshot. Now what I can do, here in Singapore region, I can create whatever servers I want, and then I can create a value from that snapshot and I can attach. Let me create some server here in Singapore region. Just I'm creating one server, I'm giving a tag. I'm just giving a tag, something like this. Let me take Red Hat AMI. Guys, as I already told, right, AMI is a region specific, which means you have a Red Hat OS, Red Hat AMIs, but the AMI IDs will not be same, as I already told. If you guys are creating a infrastructure using Terraform, in your Terraform script, if you guys are providing AMI ID, make sure that AMI ID exists, that AMI with that ID exists in that region. Otherwise, your Terraform script will contact AWS. AWS will say there is no AMI with that ID like that. In the background, Terraform also makes API calls only. I told already. So here I am manually selecting. So I am selecting this Red Hat AMI instance type key pair. Key pair again region specific, guys, which means if you already created some key pairs in Mumbai region, If you already created some key pairs in Mumbai region, those key pairs will not be listed here in Singapore region. Either you need to import the key pairs, or either you need to again create the new key pair in Singapore. So if you don't have a key pairs, you can create this key pair, you can say something, whatever name, something like this. If you don't have, you can create and use it, otherwise you can import also. Now I am creating a server in Singapore in some availability zone. Let me show. If I have to select some availability zone, I can say in which availability zone, in which subnet, under which availability zone I want to create. I can specify. Let me select 1A, that is in this subnet, which is in 1A availability zone. Again, default VPC only. Singapore region also has its own default VPC. Now it is creating a server in Singapore region. This server will have its own root storage. This server will have its own root storage. If you see, is this server has its own root storage, root volume, where OS is going to be booted, that root volume, where OS and software's purpose, it will use that root storage. Now, later, once this server is ready, let me show you, I can create a volume from that backup, that snapshot, and I can mount, I can attach that volume to this server and I can mount. So let's wait for this server to become ready. Let me connect to this server, Singapore server, using that public IP, using that key pair. My PEM file is in downloads folder. My PEM file is in downloads folder. Let me SSH. You know all these errors, permissions are too wide for that PEM file. Let me make those changes. Now this server has its own root value. This server has its own root value where OS is booted. Now, whatever snapshot I copied to Singapore, from that snapshot I can create a value. From the snapshot I can create a value directly. So let me go to snapshots in Singapore. I copied the snapshot from Mumbai to Singapore again to create a value. Let me select this. Let me go to actions, snapshot, create value. Create value. So make sure the volume you are creating also in a same availability zone in which you want to attach to that server. My EC2 instance in Singapore region I have created in 1A availability zone. Again from the snapshot, again I am going to create a value in the same availability zone so that I can attach this value. So let me create a value. If required, you can give a tags. From snapshot I am creating this one. Some value. From snapshot I am creating this value. Now this value, if I go to volumes, I can see that value, this value just now created, it is not attached to any server, it is available. So this value I am going to attach to the EC2 instance which is there in a Singapore region, this server. This server. Now I attached, if I go to my EC2 instance, if I execute lsblk, can I see one more disk, one more storage attached to that server? Yes, but it is not mounted. It is not mounted. So you can mount. You can mount with any existing directory. You can mount with any existing directory, or you can create some directory and mount. Let me create one directory now. If you see in that directory, I don't have any files as of now because it is not mounted with any storage and it is part of root. Just now I created the directory. But now I will mount. I will mount. But this time you should not format, guys. This time you should not format the disk. You should not create again that file system like ext4, ext2 or exfs, those type of things, because this volume is created from the snapshot. If I format again, what will happen? because it already has some file system. You can execute this command sudo file-s/dev/xvdf. You can execute this command. You can see already there is a file system of ext4 and there are some files. So you lost the data. So you should not format this time because you created the value from the snapshot. Now already you can see there is a file system with some data. Now what I will do, I will directly mount. I'll mount this directory that as of now we don't have anything in the demo directory. I'm going to mount sudo mount/dev/xvdf, that device name, that whatever folder, that demo folder which is part of my home EC2 user, like this. Now if you see lsblk, if you see lsblk, now is this directory of that server is mounted with this storage? Yes, you can see now with the df-kh also. And if you see that demo folder, do I have this file test.txt file which was there, which was created and persisted in another server, another disk? Now is the data is migrated? Is your data is migrated from one location to another location? This file, the data whatever you had in another server? Yes. So like this you can use your EBS volumes, that snapshots, to migrate the data or restore and recover the data also. Is everyone clear? Snapshots concept in AWS. Now once your practice is done, I recommend you to terminate these servers in Singapore. If you forgot, right? If you forgot and switch to again Mumbai, the instances might be running, there might be some storage that instances are consuming. So there might be a charges, the charges will applicable. So once your practice is done, terminate your server in Singapore. I am terminating. As I already told, if you terminate your EC2 instance, is the additional volume gets terminated? No. So additional volumes will not be terminated. So you terminate additional volumes and whatever snapshots you created. The additional volume has to be manually deleted. So delete those volumes and again delete the snapshots also, whatever you created. Otherwise charges will be applicable for snapshots also. Nothing is free here. So delete the snapshot also once your practice is done. In Singapore, let's switch to the Mumbai region. Siaji Sahaji is asking, but we kept a key pair in desktop as a PEM file in one region, so still it cannot access with other region. Understand, Sahaji, key pairs are region specific. So whatever key pair you created in Mumbai, that will not be listed in Singapore. Which means again you need to create a new key pair in Singapore. That's what I told. Don't follow cd desktop run commands. Don't follow, understand the concept. For what purpose we use key pair? I told in the first class of EC2. Key pair is used for SSH purpose. So whatever key pair I already created in Mumbai region, that key pair will not be listed in Singapore. So either you need to import that key pair again to Singapore, or either you need to create a new key pair so that you can use that key pair in other region. Can't we mount key pairs to other region? I think Chandra, are you completely new to Linux? Guys, limit your questions to the AWS. Don't ask me very silly questions. Mount, for what you will mount? Are you going to mount a file? I mean to say, are you going to mount your PEM files to the AWS regions? You can't mount to the regions, okay? You can mount storage to the servers, but your PEM file is there in your local laptop. You can't mount your local laptop storage to the AWS servers, okay? Understand before asking that question. AWS EBS is a storage. That storage you can mount to the EC2 instances. Key pair is for SSH purpose. It's a combination of two keys. We told in the EC2 session, public key and private key. Whatever PEM file you downloaded, you created and you got it got downloaded to your laptop. That is a private key. The respective public key will be part of your EC2 instance. When you are SSHing, right? That SSH process running in that server will compare whether the keys are matching or not. It is not like you can mount a key pair to the AWS regions. You can't mount key pairs to the regions. Mount is a server concept. Clear? Guys, understand? Don't ask silly questions. Okay, may brush up your Linux skills. Let's continue. Let me switch to the Mumbai region. Now, the way we have a EBS value, we have something called EC2. We have something called EC2. We already discussed this is server, and EBS is a storage for that server. EBS is a storage for that server. So EC2 is a server, EBS is a storage, block storage, which you can create, attach, mount. You can create a storage in the cloud. You can attach that storage to the EC2 instance, then you can mount. Now, the way we have a block storage, there is one more storage called object storage. There is one more storage called object storage. The example for object storage is S3, a simple storage service. The full form of S3 is a simple storage service. A simple storage service. So what is this S3? How it works, right? As I already told, S3 is a global service, which means you can access the data from anywhere. You can access the data from anywhere. What do you mean by anywhere? Without mounting that storage to your EC2 instances, your servers, you can access the files. You can upload the files and you can download the files and you can access the files from S3. You no need to mount. You no need to mount that storage to the servers. Without mounting, you can upload, you can download, you can access using APIs. In the background, everything is a REST protocol. It is going to follow HTTP, HTTPS protocol. You can upload, you can download, and you can access the files from S3 storage from anywhere. It's a global service. You can access the data from any region, any country, if you have a connectivity. That's it. Now, S3 will be used for different use cases. Each object, basically each object which we upload to S3 will have a unique identifier ID, object ID. We call it as object ID, and it will get one endpoint. Endpoint is, we call it as a object URL or object endpoint, kind of a HTTPS endpoint. So using that HTTPS endpoint, you can access from anywhere. And you can upload and download objects to the S3 buckets. S3 buckets also from any server. Via CLI you can upload, via APIs also you can upload files to the S3 bucket. You no need to mount, you can upload, download and access the files to S3. So S3 we are calling it as a bucket. I hope you can understand for what purpose we will use buckets. In our day-to-day life also we'll use buckets, right? Buckets to carry something. Buckets will carry something. We can use buckets to store and carry something. So S3 buckets will store objects. Objects are nothing but files. To upload objects to S3, you need to create a bucket, that S3 bucket, that S3 service, S3 bucket. So when it comes to S3 bucket, right, there are various use cases for which you can use S3 bucket. If you take any application static data, application static files, application static files, application static files like you have images, you have documents, MP3 files, MP4 files, etc. Static files can be maintained in S3, and these static files can be served. These static files can be served to the end customers directly from S3. Your dynamic APIs, your applications can be deployed in EC2, and your static files can be part of your S3. And if the developers, if the UI developers, that the front-end developers are using this CloudFront URLs, that CloudFront URLs, or if they are using this S3 URLs in the code, that S3 endpoints in the code, in HTML code, the images, audio files, documents, video files can be rendered from S3, but APIs, dynamic content will be served from your application servers. Static files will be served from S3 buckets. So this S3 can be integrated with CloudFront also, CDN, content delivery network, content delivery network. So the advantage with that CDN, content delivery network, CloudFront, it uses edge locations. Edge locations. So whenever request is coming from any end customers, first it will try to see in the edge location in that CDN CloudFront. If the data, that static data which is already cached in the edge location, then CloudFront will distribute the static data from edge location only. Otherwise, the CloudFront can get the data from S3 and cache in the edge location. So it will improve the performance of application that loading, that rendering the data. So S3 bucket can be used to maintain the application related static files, images, audios, MP3, MP4, like that. The best use case which I can say, the Netflix. Everyone use Netflix, right? At least even though you don't know anything about IT, everyone use Netflix. What is Netflix? Netflix is a OTT platform where you can watch a lot of movies, a lot of shows, right? Online streaming, right? So Netflix is hosted in AWS. That Netflix application which we guys are using to watch the movies, audio, video, some shows, right? The Netflix application is hosted in AWS, and the Netflix architecture, if you see, Netflix is leveraging lot of services in AWS. Netflix is leveraging lot of services in AWS. S3 also one of the service internally used by that Netflix application. So if you see, this Netflix application will have a petabytes of data, right? This Netflix will have a petabytes of data, like lot of audio files, video files, images. So if you see, these files are actually served from CloudFront. Actually served from CloudFront. CloudFront is internally integrated with S3. So CloudFront uses CDN, content delivery network, edge location concept. So this type of static data will be cached in the edge location in the sense near to the customers. So if the static data is there in the edge location cached by that CloudFront, it will serve the data from edge location to the customers. Otherwise, if it is not there, it will go and get the data from the S3 and store in the edge location. So all these static files of that applications are actually served from the S3. AWS is using this. Netflix is using lot of services like CDN, that CloudFront, S3, EC2 instances, RDS. EC2 instances are used to host the applications that APIs, dynamic content, dynamic APIs, where you are going to register to the Netflix and you are going to subscribe the plans, where you are going to make the payments. Those type of things are dynamic logic will be there, right? So those type of applications, those type of dynamic APIs is hosted in the application servers like EC2. These guys are internally using databases, RDS, like that. So S3 is a perfect place to store application static files like images, audio files, documents, MP3. And also S3 is a perfect place to store and maintain the log files, your application logs or your system logs, your load balancer logs or your database logs, the logs where you can store and maintain the logs. And S3 is a perfect place to maintain archival data, historical data, kind of a backups, archival data, archival data, backups, right? If you want to take a backup of something, your database backup as a zip file, as a tar file, you can create and upload to S3. You can take a backup of your database and you can upload to S3. You can take a backup of your Jenkins also, and you can upload that tar file or zip file to the S3 bucket. Archival, backup, and historical data. Suppose you need very huge data like a historical data for auditing purpose. Let's say there is a requirement for you to maintain last 10 years of log files, but you are not going to access those logs frequently. You are not going to access those logs frequently, but for auditing purpose, we are going to maintain last 10 years of log files, which you are not going to access frequently. So in that case, AWS S3 is offering a storage class called Glacier. In the Glacier, you can maintain this historical data with very less charges. Low cost storage, historical storage, where you can maintain in S3 Glacier. Now, one more important concept which you need to understand, if you guys are using infrastructure as a code, if you guys are using infrastructure as a code like Terraform, if you guys are using infrastructure as a code Terraform, you are going to write a Terraform scripts, right? To generate, to create infrastructure. You are writing a infrastructure as a code. Basically, your Terraform files, and using this Terraform, using the Terraform software, using the Terraform software, with the help of this infrastructure code, right? You may execute Terraform apply, Terraform plan, you will do Terraform apply, you will do. We will discuss about all these things, what a plan does, what apply does, but let's understand one important concept, why people can, S3 can be used for other use cases also. So Terraform apply, Terraform init, like this, you will execute some commands. So there is a Terraform script written. You have written a Terraform script to create some resources. You created a Terraform script to create some resources. Let's say you are trying to create a AWS EC2 instance. So in your Terraform script, in the TF file, you might have said provider AWS, right? Provider AWS, and you will specify region. Maybe you want to create some resources in Mumbai region, AP South 1. You have mentioned provider details. Terraform has to provision the resources using which provider, in which provider it has to provision the resources. You are going to give a provider information like this in your Terraform script. Then you are going to define the resources, what resources you want to provision using that provider. So you say AWS EC2 instance, you want to create some server. You want to create some server. In a declarative way, you are going to say AMI, out of which AMI you need that server. Like that, you are going to specify. Like that, you are going to specify some AMI ID, some AMI ID. As per your requirement, you are going to say, I need AMI. That server has to be created using some AMI, maybe like Amazon Linux AMI, this one, or maybe Red Hat AMI, like this one. You are going to specify some AMI ID in your Terraform script, something like this. And you are going to say instance type, what type of instance you want. Let's say you might be saying T2 dot medium or micro or X large, double X large, like this. You are going to specify the resources. You are going to define your resources, whatever resources you want to provision in that provider in a declarative way. In the Terraform script, you will write like that. Now, the moment you execute Terraform plan, Terraform will internally use, Terraform will maintain the state. Terraform will maintain the state of your actual resources in that provider. Terraform will maintain the state of that resources. So by default, Terraform will use local state, local backend as a state, which means it will use local storage to maintain the state file. Wherever, in whatever server you are executing this Terraform plan command, it will try to see, is there any state file already? It will create a state and it will manage the state, it will maintain the state. It will compare the current state, that current state of your infrastructure with this desired state. If you guys are executing for the first time, the current state, there is no resources. These resources are not there in this provider. So current state, nothing. But this is the desired state. So what Terraform will do, it will create the resources. The Terraform will create the resources in those providers. In that provider, in the target provider, the Terraform will create a EC2 instance using with a T2.micro as an instance type AMI, like this. It will create a EC2 instance. Internally, it will use a EBS value that you already know for booting. For booting, it will use EBS value, root value. Then it will maintain the current state. So in the Terraform, there is one more file called TF state file. Terraform state file. So in this Terraform state file, it is going to represent the current state. Now, if only one guy is working on the Terraform scripts, only one DevOps guy is working on that infrastructure, then no problem. In his laptop or desktop, he is having that state file. Again, if he is executing same script, since there is a state maintained by Terraform locally here, is it going to create this type of resource one more time? No, because the current state and desired state is matching. But let's consider there is one more guy like me. I am one more DevOps guy, and this Terraform script is part of your SCM. Let's consider Terraform script is part of your SCM repository, source code repository. Can I get my Terraform script to my laptop also? Like, this is me, Balaji. I am also working on the same project. I have access to that repository. I can get this one. Now here, Raja has already done this. Now I got the code. Again, I am executing Terraform plan, Terraform apply, like that. By default, Terraform will use a local backend to maintain the state. So the Terraform state, the current state of the infrastructure is in this system locally. But again, as a Balaji, if I am again executing a Terraform script, is it going to duplicate the infrastructure because there is no current state in this system locally? Yes. So if multiple people and multiple teams are working on that infrastructure as a code like Terraform, if by default if they are using local backend to maintain the state file, do have again inconsistency in our resources again, whatever we are provisioning using Terraform again? Yes. So to do to deal with these problems, Terraform is started offering remote backends. Terraform is started offering remote backends because currently there is no state file here, there is no state file local here. The Terraform, what it will think, so currently there is no state, which means there is no resources in the target environment, target cloud. Again it will create the resources, it will create the resources as per that resource, that Terraform script. But there is a duplicate inconsistency because there is no state file here, so it will consider there is no state, and again it will create and it will maintain state like this. So it is a problem when multiple teams, multiple people are working on the Terraform scripts like infrastructure as a code. Let's say you have a CI/CD process, like a Jenkins. In Jenkins pipeline also I can run these Terraform scripts, right? I can get the Terraform code from SCM and I can run the Terraform scripts also in my Jenkins pipelines by installing Terraform software. So anytime anytime DevOps guys are making changes to this SCM repository where we are maintaining Terraform, this pipeline will execute. And again, since the Terraform state is maintained locally by default, since there is no state here, again, is this Jenkins pipeline internally executing a Terraform commands, again will create a resources considering there is no state, there is no resources created already like that? Yes. So we have a lot of problems here, right? When multiple teams or people working on the Terraform, you have issues to maintain the state. So that is where Terraform is offering, instead of local backend, Terraform is offering remote backends. So in your Terraform script, you can provide the remote backend. S3 can be used as a remote backend. S3 can be used as a remote backend for Terraform to maintain the state file. S3 can be used as a remote backend to maintain the state file, remotely instead of locally. So you can have one S3 bucket. You need to have that S3 bucket created first. Right? And that bucket details, Raja Verma is asking, can you show us a practical demo for this one? Raja Verma have started Terraform, okay? I am explaining the use cases of EC2, what is EC2, what is EBS, what is EC2. Once you are comfortable with this one, then I will start Terraform. I have not yet started single Terraform concept, okay? If I directly go for a Terraform, I can explain Terraform. But that time you have a doubt, sir, what is this S3? What is the TC2? What is the TBS? What is that VPC? I can create a VPC using Terraform. I can create a EC2 instances using Terraform. I can create any resources, cloud resources using Terraform. So if you don't know what is EC2, what is S3, I can teach only Terraform, but you may not understand, right? So that's why first I am explaining AWS resources, what is AWS, what is EC2, what is VPC, what is what. Then I am going to explain Terraform to create the resources automatically. So I am explaining AWS as of now, not Terraform. Okay. As a bonus, whatever I am covering here, that is bonus only. Now I can have a Terraform, I can have a S3 bucket created here. This S3 details I can give, in the my Terraform script, so that Terraform will use that S3 bucket to maintain the state. Terraform will use that S3 bucket to maintain the state in my Terraform block, right? In my Terraform block, I can give something like this also. Guys, we will do all these things in Terraform sessions, but I am explaining the use case of AWS S3 bucket. So I can use S3 bucket to maintain the state file of the Terraform also. In my Terraform script, I can give like this. Let's say this is my bucket name. My bucket name is, just to give an example, LIC, just to give an example. So this is my bucket name. With this name, I have a bucket. So I'm giving this bucket details. To my Terraform script. So it will maintain the Terraform state file in this S3 bucket, the bucket in whatever region, that bucket, let's say you created a bucket in Mumbai region, you have that bucket in Mumbai region, Terraform will maintain the state file, whatever state file, that will maintain in this S3. Now, when multiple members are working on IAC, now if I am using S3 as a backend to maintain the state file by Terraform, now do I have a consistency again, whether Balaji is executing, whether Raja is executing, whether your pipeline is executing, all these Terraform, wherever you are executing, Terraform knows that the state file is part of this S3 bucket. So for the first time Raja has executed the Terraform script. So there is no state file here. It will create a resources and it will create a state file here. In this S3 bucket, it will create a state file. Terraform state file, it will be created. It will create the Terraform state file. When the same script has been downloaded by Balaji and again Balaji is executing, does Terraform will check this remote backend to get the state? If there is already state file, it is going to get that state file, and if there are any changes in the desired state with current state, then it will make the changes. Otherwise, is it going to recreate your resources again? Again Balaji is contacting this guy, this S3 only to get the state file? No. And again this pipeline is executing also same state. But if there are any changes to your resources, let's say he is changing some resources, he is updating some tags like that, he is updating some tags or something, he is updating someone, again it will compare that current state and it will update the infrastructure as per the desired state, and that updated state file will be again maintained in S3. So S3 buckets can be used to maintain the state files of the Terraform script. So that Terraform state S3 buckets can be used as a remote backends to maintain the Terraform state. So practically I will do this, but I am explaining what is S3, what are the different use cases for S3. S3 can be used for maintaining application static files and data. You can use logs, you can use archival, backups and historical, and S3 can be used as to maintain the state file of your Terraform. Clear the different use cases of S3? When I start Terraform, first I will explain local state only. First I will explain with local state, then I will explain the problems with that local state file, then I will explain this how to use S3 as a remote backend to maintain the state file for the Terraform. We will do the labs when I go for Terraform. As of now, I'm still explaining AWS services only. Why I'm explaining, when I go on Terraform, you should not ask what is S3, what is EC2. I can't discuss there. That's why I'm discussing first these resources. Any questions, any queries on S3, the different use cases which I am discussing here? These are few use cases, but there are a lot of other use cases for which you can use S3. Now, let me create a S3 bucket. Now, let's come back to S3 concepts. How many buckets? There are some type of interview questions. These are AWS questions, nothing to do with Terraform. But let me explain. How many buckets can be created in one account by default? Answer is 100. 100 buckets. 100 buckets. It's a soft limit. It's a soft limit. It's a soft limit, which means it can be extendable. Which can be extendable. Guys, there is something called service limits. If you take any cloud, there is something called service limit. I hope I told, I think in the EC2 session, did I told that service limits? Did I show that service limits page? Each service has some limitations. Anyone recollect? So let me tell you, if not, there is a service limits for any resources which you are going to create in AWS. AWS is going to impose some limits. AWS is going to impose some limits. So every services has a limitations. That limits you can consider a kind of a quota of resources you can create. If you want to create more than that, right, you need to talk to the AWS to get the limit increased. So there are only 100 buckets by default you can create in one account. It's a soft limit. It can be extendable. If you see in AWS, there is something called service quota, service quotas. So AWS service quotas. Not only AWS, guys, you take GCP, you take Azure cloud, any cloud, there is some quota of resources, the default number of resources which you can create. If you want to create more than that much, right, you need to increase the quota. You need to get the quota increased with the help of AWS. So we have AWS service quotas. AWS service quotas. Understand what do you mean by quota? Quota is like a limit. So quotas also referred as a limits. Quotas also referred as a limits in AWS services. The maximum values for the resources, actions, items in your AWS account. So they are going to have some default values, for each resource which you can create. But if you need to create more resources, you need to contact AWS and create a request, increase request, quota increase request. So if you see in my AWS account, I am going to service quotas page, service quotas page. Service quotas page. Now, if you see, I am going to this AWS services. I am searching with S3. I am searching with S3. I am going to that S3 service. You can see buckets, buckets, buckets. AWS default quota value. What is the AWS default quota value for buckets? If you see 100. What does it mean? Can I create more than 100 buckets in my account? More than 100 S3 buckets in my account, can I create? No, I can't do. That is a limitation. That's a quota. But it is saying adjustable yes. Adjustable yes in the sense, can I create a quota request to increase that default limitation to some higher number if I want to create more than 100 first? Yes. So adjustable yes. So you need to create a request. Select this, quota name, and there is a request here. Request quota increase. Request quota increase. Click on this request quota increase. So you can specify if you have a requirement to create maybe 1000 buckets or 150 buckets or 200 buckets like that. You give the how much the new limit you want, and create a request. The moment I click on this request, right, the request will go to AWS. The request will go to AWS. The support engineers, the support team who is working in AWS, the support engineers who is working in AWS will work on this ticket, and they will approve. They will approve. If they approve that quota request increase, the request quota increase, if they approve, in my account, can I create 101, 102, 103 like that also? Yes. There are no limitations from AWS. There are no limitations from AWS. You can request 1,000 buckets also. Unless until you are paying, they will, okay, right? They are going to get a revenue from you. You are creating 1,000 buckets and you are uploading some files. They are going to get a revenue. There is no limitation. These are the default values they are imposing. As per your requirement, you can create a quota increase request to get the new quotas. Clear? Now, why I am telling this? Let's say you already have 100 buckets. You already have 100 buckets in AWS. Whether you are creating manually, whether you are creating 101, that other bucket, you already have 100 buckets in your account. Whether you are creating via GUI manually, or whether you are creating via API, via CLI, or via Terraform, is it possible for us to create another bucket if you already have 100 buckets? If you already have 100 buckets, will I able to create a one more S3 bucket if the limit is 100? Whether you are creating manually, whether you are creating via Terraform, via CLI, via API, no. You may think, sir, Terraform script is getting failed. Terraform script is getting failed. Terraform script is getting failed. Like that, you may think. But Terraform is internally contacting AWS APIs only. Whether you are using GUI, whether you are using CLI, whether you are using SDK, in the background, everything is a API call to the AWS. Even Terraform is also, instead of you are writing a code, complex code, you are defining your resources in a declarative way. Terraform is doing the heavy lifting in the background. Terraform is doing that heavy lifting in the background. Terraform is internally making the required API calls to create the resources as per your declarations. So Terraform is also internally making API call that AWS may reject the request. You already have 100 buckets like that. Then what is the solution? If you already have 100 buckets, and if you want to create a 101 bucket, 102 bucket, you need to first increase the request, the quota increase. Once it is approved, then you can create. Once it is approved, it can create. But if you guys are using free tier, when you guys created AWS accounts, right? That time you selected free tier, developer plan, business plan was there. Three options was there. If you guys remember that one, we were having three options: free tier, developer plan, business plan. So if you guys are using free tier accounts, does AWS will approve some request? No. AWS may reject some request because you are using it for free of cost, not for business, not for developing something, not for deploying something. So they may reject. But if you are an enterprise user, if you are an enterprise customer, they will approve whatever request you are requesting. If you are using with the free tier plan, they may reject some request because you are using it for free. They don't want to increase the quota because other business customers, other enterprise customers may impact if they are allowing you to use more resources. Other business customers, other enterprise users may don't have resources in AWS. So that's why if you are using free tier, some requests might be approved, some requests might not be approved. But if you guys are using business plans, enterprise plans, or developer plans, they will approve. Clear? Again, what is service limit, service quota here in AWS, how it is related to Terraform also I am explaining, because Terraform, using Terraform, you are going to create AWS resources, but you are already reaching that quota. You are already at the quota edge. Does Terraform scripts will be executed successfully? Does AWS will allow you to create the resources if you are already at the quota? No. Clear? This is for S3. Like this, there are various limits, right? If you see how many bucket policies can be created, right? How many bucket policies can be created? And there is one more important question. What is the max object size, max file size which we can upload in S3? Individual file size. What is the max file size, individual object size which we can upload in S3? You can see 5 terabytes, 5 TB. That is individual file. That is individual file, single file. It is not your S3 limit. It is not your S3 limit. It is not your S3 limit. You can upload n number of files, but the individual object size, that file size should be less than 5 TB. But is it adjustable? Is it extendable or adjustable? If you see, no. Like this, every resource has some kind of a quota. Every service has some kind of a quota. Not only for S3, if you go for VPC also, there are some limitations. Suppose you want to create a VPC. You want to create a VPC. So VPCs per region. How many VPCs per region? The default quota value imposed by AWS. How many VPCs per region we can create? 5. Only 5. This is the applied quota value and it is the AWS default value. Suppose you already have 5 different VPCs in that region. Again, you are trying to create a one more VPC. Whether you are using GUI, CLI, API or Terraform, does AWS will allow you to create a one more VPC if you already have a 5 VPCs and that is your quota limit? No. In that case, do I need to increase the quota? So here again, select this one, request quota increase. Suppose in that region you may need 10 VPCs. You can give and you can create a request like this, but AWS will approve or reject. But enterprise customers, they will approve. But if you are using a free tier, they will ask a lot of questions. Why you want to create 10 VPCs, right? Can you provide some additional information for what purpose you are using this account? Because if you are using a free tier, but if you already selected business plan, developer plan, they will approve because they know that you are using for some application, some business, not for personal, not for trainings, not for learning. So they will approve. But this business, this free tier plan, they may ask some questions. You need to give a justifications so that they can approve. Clear? Service quotas, very, very important concept in any cloud you take. Like this, you take any service, right? You take maybe EKS, Elastic Kubernetes service also, they will have some limitations. How many number of EKS clusters can be created in this? You can see default value 100 clusters. If required, you can adjust more. Not only EKS, let's say you want to go with RDS, relational database as a service. That RDS also has some, how many database clusters, how many database cluster, how many RDS services I can create by default. You can see 40. Like that, everything has some limits. Something can be adjustable, something cannot be adjustable. Something can be adjustable, which means it can be increased, but some things cannot be increased. If you see, when you go to EC2 also, when you go to EC2 also, when you go to EC2 also, we have limits. Number of vCPUs, how many CPUs, how many CPUs you can use. If you go to EC2 dashboard, there is a limit section here. When you go to EC2 dashboard, there is a limit section here. There is a limit section here. If you see EC2 related limitations, I can see here itself. How many auto scaling groups can be created in my account like that? How many auto scaling groups can be created? Auto scaling is also easy to concept. 500 auto scaling groups. How many launch configurations can be created? 200. 200. Now current limit. Now you can see there is a vCPU limit, sir. There is a vCPU limit. Now can I create any type of dedicated host in my account? No. Let me show you. Let me start with maybe general purpose EC2 instances or all type of EC2 instances, right? If you see, we have some limitations here. Suppose I want to create a spot instances. I want to create a spot instances in all the category: compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, GPU optimized. What is the current number of vCPU limits I have? Will I able to create a servers more than this much CPUs, right? If I am going to create maybe 4 servers, each server is taking 8 CPU, then will I able to create a fifth server? Suppose I am creating 4 servers, each server is taking 8 CPUs, will I able to create a fifth server? No. In spot category, not only spot category, on demand also. Let's say on demand, on demand, on demand also. So you have like how many CPUs can be used? How many CPUs can be used? Let me show you. Instead of all, let me show you running instances. Let me filter. If you see currently on-demand category, I filtered using running instances like this only. So if you see on-demand, all categories, general purpose, compute optimized, GPU optimized, what is the current limit, vCPU limit in my account as of now? 32 CPUs. Now, will I able to create a more servers? If I already have maybe 6 servers, each server is taking maybe 4 CPU, 24 CPUs are consumed. I can create maybe another 2-3 servers. But if already there are 4 servers, each server is taking 8 CPU, will I able to create a T2.micro server also at least? If already 32 CPUs are used, will I able to use 33 CPUs for another server like that? No. So every service has a limits. This is nothing to do with Terraform. This is AWS concept, any cloud concept. You go and check, guys. You may not have 32 CPU. Maybe some people will have only 4 CPU, or some people may have only 1 CPU like that. You go and check. Vijay Lakshmi is having only 1 CPU as a limit. So that's why Vijay Lakshmi was not able to create more than 2 servers at a time. Even though she was not able to create T2.micro servers, two servers parallelly running. What she was doing, she created one T2.micro. She has to stop the T2.micro server to create another T2.micro and start. Because that is the default limit they imposed for Vijay Lakshmi account. Clear? You have to know all these concepts so that you can understand what is what. Clear what is the service limits, EC2 limits? Now, if you really want to increase, right, you can select this one. You can select this one. You can select this one, request limit increase. You can say request limit increase. You can say request limit increase, but again, AWS may reject also. AWS may reject also because you are a free tier user. You are practicing, for learning purpose, you are taking this one. For learning purpose, you are taking this one. So you just practice with one server. You are not a business customer. You are not a developer. You are not using developer plan. You are not using enterprise plan like that, they may say. But sometimes they may approve also. So here you can create a request. So maybe I want to get more CPUs for Mumbai region. I'll select the region. Right? I can say for all standard instances, right? Let's say currently if you have a one, right? I can say, can you please at least give me maybe 8 CPUs or maybe 16 CPUs, like that you can create. But I already have a 32 CPUs. I already have a 32 CPUs. If I try to ask more, they may reject because I'm a free tier. So clear? What is the service limits? Again, the way we have service limits for S3, all AWS services also has the limitations. Not only in AWS, guys, you go with Google Cloud, you go with Azure Cloud, similar concepts are there. Limits. You need to get the limits increased if you want to create more resources in the cloud. So this is how I am saying how many buckets can be created in one account by default. 100 buckets. That is the maximum. What is the max file size? What is the max file size? In S3, 5 TB. Vijay Lakshmi is asking, sir, can we change free tier to business tier? You can change, but the moment the day you change, there is no free for you. Everything is chargeable. Whatever resource you are going to create, even though you are creating T2.micro also, they are going to charge you. They will consider you as a enterprise customer. You are running some company, you are owning some company, you are using that AWS to host your applications, your data, like that. So you are responsible for whatever service you are using. Better you create another AWS account, or maybe try to switch to other region. Maybe try to switch to other region where check whether there is a more vCPUs you can get there, or maybe create another account. That is not in our control. AWS has to satisfy your response to that ticket so that they will approve. Clear? Now let's come back to S3 concept. Let's come back to S3 concept. Now for demonstrating, last time I created a ticket. 7 days ago I created a ticket. But if you see AWS, he's asking some lot of information, right? So I requested something like this. January 18th itself, I requested something like this, but they were asking lot of questions, right? So they have not yet approved. They have not yet approved, if you see. But there is a SLA from AWS side. There is a SLA from AWS side, right? If you guys are business customers, if you guys are using business plan, the SLA from AWS is within 30 minutes, AWS will respond. If you are a business customer, for free time, right? You are using it for free, just for learning and exploring purpose. There is no SLA. They will take whatever time. They may approve, they may reject also. Clear? Again, how AWS works basically. Now let's come back to S3 concept. And there is one more thing. S3 bucket name should be unique across. S3 bucket name should be unique across AWS. Not only in your account, complete AWS. No one should have already bucket with that name, whatever you are going to use. If someone already has a bucket with that name, you will get a error. So let me create some bucket. Let me go to S3. Let me go to S3. Let me go to S3. The moment I click on S3, it switched to single, global. But actually S3, when you create a bucket, right? When you create a bucket, it will ask you to select the region. Even though the data can be accessed from anywhere, but AWS will store that objects. It will maintain that objects in some region. So in whatever region you want to create that bucket, you can create. So I am giving some name like this, a tester, and I am trying to create a bucket in Mumbai region. If I try to click on this create bucket, I am getting this error. Bucket with same name already exists. As I already told, bucket name should be unique across AWS. You have to use some bucket name which should be unique. So I am going to give some application name, that use case name for whatever purpose. For now, let me give my bucket name as some name, Terraform with AWS, Mithun Technology batch, something like this, some unique. So I am creating a bucket with this name in the Mumbai region. If there is no one created a bucket with that name, I'll get this bucket. So I got this bucket, Terraform with Mithun Tech, some bucket. In this bucket, we can upload objects. We can upload objects. This can be done using GUI. This can be done using GUI, graphical user interface. This can be done using CLI, command line interface, or your Java code. You have written a Java code. Your application developers has developed some Java code, Python code, Node.js code also. Using the APIs offered by AWS also, your applications can upload files to S3. Your applications can serve the files from S3 also. Let me upload manually using GUI. Add files. I'm adding one file, some dummy file. I'm uploading one file. Let me click on upload. Now in this S3 bucket, there is one object now. This is my bucket. This is my bucket. In this bucket, I have one object. Each object will have a unique identifier and object URL. I can consider this as an endpoint. Now, can we access that object directly using this endpoint from anywhere? That can be in your HTML code also. You can refer this as a UI developer. You can refer this object endpoint in your HTML code, front-end code, so that the object will be directly rendered from S3 like that. If you see, this is the object URL, but by default objects are not public. So even though you guys are trying to access, you are getting access denied, because by default objects are not public. It is not public. There is a security here. You need to grant access to the objects as per your requirement. Are you guys able to access this object even though I share that object endpoint, object URL? No, because there are permissions. So by default objects are not public. So there is some security concepts also. You have something called public access, you have something called ACL, you have something called bucket policies. Using these concepts, you can manage access to the buckets and objects also, using some concepts like public access, ACL, bucket policies. So you can manage access to the buckets and its objects using these concepts. So I will continue from here tomorrow, guys. So how to grant public access, how to grant specific access using bucket policies, I'll continue from here tomorrow. Guys, even though it's not a AWS course, I'm trying to cover the services in detail so that you can understand AWS also along with Terraform. People may think I can learn only Terraform. You can learn only Terraform also, but you are not going to understand what you are doing with Terraform. So that's why we are discussing some resources like AWS resources like EC2, EBS, EFS kind of stuff. Then how to create those resources using Terraform, that is infrastructure as a code, so that you can understand, right? If you know what is EC2, what is required for you to create a EC2 when you guys created manually, Can you guys provide same information in your Terraform script, like instance type, AMI ID, security group, key pair? You already know what is what. So all those details you will provide in your Terraform script. Terraform will provision the infrastructure as per your script. So try to go through this recording and understand. I will continue from here tomorrow. Okay. Any questions? Any queries? Feel free to ask. Sir, I have one question. Created one EC2 server in Mumbai region with a new key pair. Can we use the same key pair in another EC2 instance which I am trying to create in Singapore region? By mentioning public key pair of Mumbai EC2 instance? No. You need to import. You need to import the key, because while creating a server, you need to select the key pair, mandatory. That is mandatory option. Otherwise, if you don't select no key pair option, if you select proceed without key pair, right? You don't have any key copied to your EC2 instance, you can't SSH. If required, instead of creating a new key pair, there is something called import. You can import the key pairs also. You import the key pair, then you can use the same key. You import that key to the Singapore, then you can use the same key. If you go to this key pairs, right, there are two options. One is create a new key pair. In Singapore, you can generate a new key pair. Otherwise, there is one more option called import a new key pair. So you can generate SSH keys. I hope you understand what is SSH keys. Don't ask again, that is Linux concept. You can generate SSH keys. Can you execute SSH keygen? It will generate public key and private key, RSA file and RSA pub file. Yes. So if you generate SSH keys using SSH keygen, so you can import the RSA pub file, that public key here. You already have that private file in your local laptop where you have generated SSH keys. Using that local private file, again will be able to SSH to this EC2 instance. If you imported that public key here and you use that key, with that servers, yes. So import key pair is also there. Create key pair, import key pair. But if you want to import the key pair, right, you need to generate SSH keys, then you can import. Clear? If you still have a confusion, that is AWS concepts, guys. You need to brush up your AWS concepts again. Anyone has any other question? Okay, thank you. That's it for today. I'll continue tomorrow with S3. Other concepts like what is that bucket policies, public access, all those things will continue tomorrow. Thank you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.